I am fully aware this is not. I should have my Colin First safety tie on, shouldn't I? Let's rip all this out. This is the first job. Get this all out with the pipe work. A flood has ensued. There was a piece of pipe that was not clipped properly. Welcome back, or if it's your first time here, think about subscribing down below before we get started. Autumn is definitely here, and I'm starting to feel it on occasion. Most days are warm enough at the moment, but the night times are a little bit chilly. And with that in mind, it would be fantastic if I can get this thing fired up. But before I can do that, I need to make sure that I upgrade my hot water system, which, as some of you might know, pumps hot water, well, cold water I should say, through the stove, which makes it hot, and then pumps that hot water around the van, which gives me not only hot water to wash up with and in my shower, but also it pushes that hot water around the van, warming up the toilet room, which gets really cold in the evenings and especially in the mornings, but also just the corners of the van where condensation has a tendency to want to build up. As you'll see, my system is a completely DIY homemade setup, and there have been some issues, I'm not going to lie. There's been a lot of issues with it, but with everything I do, it's a bit of an experiment, and I'm learning from what I can find online, having a few of my own ideas, and just trying to build something that isn't going to cost the earth, because I don't want to spend hundreds or even thousands of pounds on pre-made systems that, to be honest, won't probably work within the parameters that I need anyway. But even if I can find something, it's usually so expensive. It's much easier just to build it myself. And also, if it goes wrong and something needs maintaining, because I built it, I know how to fix it. I'm happy with the pipework around the van, and there's no need to change any of that. I am very happy with the balance of heat exchange between the stove and the water, and then the water and the radiators, and they seem to stay mostly within balance. The main two issues that I've had with the system are its tendency to steam off too much water and need to be manually refilled all the time, and also have too much air in the system which needs to be manually bled. I want to try to automate some of that as much as possible so that I don't have to deal with that and pay attention to it throughout the season. The other issue that I've had is the need to have the heating running while I have the hot water running, and I want to change the way the system flows and how those two flows link up to make sure that I can choose to have both or one or the other, and not always have to have the heating part on. So those are the two main changes, and we'll get into exactly why I'm doing that first change, and I'll show you the complete mess that's inside of the cupboard, because there is an absolute mess behind here somewhere, where I had a lot of issue, not just with the water kind of steaming off and losing sort of volume within the system, but sometimes if I let the stove go a little bit too fast and produce too much heat, the hot water would get boiled and sort of throw boiling, sort of bubbling, steaming hot water through into the reservoir, and that would create chaos back there and also drain the system even faster. So that was a big problem, and I need to kind of fix that. I can't have that just happening all the time, and if it does happen, I need to make sure that the system can handle it rather than it spewing out into the van. So the first thing and the most important thing that I'm going to be changing is the reservoir. This is my little canister I've ordered. It's nice and small, it's compact, it's made of metal, it should be fine. It doesn't need to be pressurized. That's one of the big differences between my hot water system and your traditional one you might have in your house. I've gone with an unpressurized system just because it's less of a problem when I'm building it, in terms of using connections and fittings that are rated for hot water and high pressure. I just have to worry about them being rated for hot water, and that made it a lot cheaper for the pipe work and a lot easier for me to fit it. And it was also a bit of peace of mind, because I don't know about you, but the idea of boiling hot water, or scalding hot water I guess, spewing out at high pressure somewhere in my van and me having to deal with that is not a pleasant thought at all. So low pressure it was, and it also made it easier with pumps, to be honest. It's just a lot more 12 volt pumps available that don't have to run at high wattages and stuff like that. So yeah, it was a no-brainer really. I just went low pressure system. So yeah, this is totally fine for hot water, and because there's no pressure it should be fine, but I still want it to be sealed and airtight just so no steam can get out. So I've chosen an airtight container. I'm going to give it an overflow that will go to the outside so that any steam that does get produced will leak out to the outside, and obviously we're still going to get the water level dropping. So to deal with that and stop me from having to manually do it, I've got this float valve which is rated for hot water, which is going to sit inside of the reservoir, and anytime the water gets too low, this is going to automatically fill it up from my water tanks, and I'm not going to have to worry about checking on levels and things like that. If too much water gets in, then the overflow will handle that, and I've just got to make sure that I've designed it in such a way where it's not constantly overflowing and it just empties my tanks out onto the floor outside, which I don't think is going to be too difficult, but that's about the only thing I can see being a potential issue with the new system. And fingers crossed we don't have to deal with that one. So the other change is the flow of the two systems that are kind of linked into one. That's the heating that goes around the van, but then also the hot water that is produced inside of my calorifier. So like a marine calorifier. It's supposed to have engine coolant that goes through it to heat the water, but I just use the hot water from the stove. And essentially, at the moment, the two systems are linked in a way that isn't really working for me, and I want to change that. So I'm going to give you a quick diagram of how it works right now and how I want it to work, so you can see the change that I'm going to be making and visualize that as we go. The current system has the reservoir, and that's, excuse my absolute terrible drawing. So we have pipe coming from there, we have a little pump, and that pushes the water around the van. Excuse my very terrible drawing, but we'll represent that as the radiators and all their pipework around the van, and it essentially then gets pushed back around to what is essentially the stove, and the pipework in the stove then feeds back out to the reservoir, and we have a circle. So essentially the pump is drawing water from the reservoir around the van, through the stove and back to the reservoir, creating our circle. And the reservoir obviously keeps that water level just high enough, but allows any steam from the stove to kind of get left behind in there before it goes around the system. Unfortunately, we still get a lot of trapped air behind that pump still, just because there's so many tiny little bubbles, I guess. And I think as well, as the water cools, it has a tendency to release more bubbles. So that's the loop for the heating, but then we have a separate loop for the hot water. That loop starts again from the reservoir, but with a separate pipe, goes to another pump, then gets pushed around to my calorifier, goes through there, and then comes back around to the reservoir. So as you can see, it's a completely separate system almost, but they just share the same reservoir. The problem with that is that if I want to run the hot water system and not the heating system, it doesn't do anything. Without the heating running, the water in this reservoir doesn't heat up. It's not forced through the stove. Originally, I decided that I would always have this system running at the same time as this one, and that wouldn't be a problem. However, the heating system has to get up to temperature before I can start producing hot water. So the fundamental difference will be the fact that we'll split off after the reservoir for the two systems, but we'll rejoin before the stove, meaning that either system can pump hot water through the stove. However, I want to make one other slight change. We have the stove, and we'll have hot water coming from the stove to the reservoir, but instead of going directly to the reservoir, I actually want to have it coming through as pipework, which essentially goes upwards and then splits off. And I want the reservoir not to be part of the active flow, but just to be up here as its own little reservoir, with automatic water being able to come in, an overflow for it to come out, keeping that level always exactly how I want it. the water from the actual pumping system will go down here, split at this point, and go to the two separate pumps, one here, one here. The next part, and this is kind of critical to make sure that the flow never goes the wrong way in either the systems, meaning the whole thing could take a complete U-turn on the way it works, is I'm going to have some one-way valves. Then this water will go to the calorifier and flow back around towards the stove. At the same time, this one will go to the van. We'll draw another lovely picture of the van and all of the radiators and stuff like that, and then come back where they'll both join up again and then go to the stove. Now what that means is, if this pump is running, we can have water going to the heating system around the van, back through the stove, and always back around in a circle. But then the same can be done with just the hot water, pushing it around. Now I will agree this looks really silly. I've done it almost the wrong way around, because the pipework for the hot water system will be a lot shorter, and you'll see that. So this is not the best diagram in the world. I do apologise. So the first job of all this is just to make the reservoir, to be honest. I'm going to drill some holes into this, put some of the pipework onto it, and hopefully get this working the way it should be. Yeah, first thing first, we need to get some holes into this reservoir. I need one directly in the middle of the bottom for a tank connector. Then I'm going to want one in the sides, and I then need a hole in the top. That's going to be the trickiest one, I'd say. The top is actually, I don't know if you can really tell, but that is not one layer, that's two. I think I'm going to connect to the inside layer, so the top one I need to have big enough so I don't actually touch that with the pipes at all. I want to take too big a chunk because I still want it to have its integrity. But essentially, I need a hole in this one that's just big enough for that thread, and it needs to be pretty tight because the little bit around there is where I want to make the connection to make it airtight. The hole in the top can be bigger, and then the hole in the bottom and the side need to be big enough for this. I have some hole cutters. I'm going to be honest though, they are not for metal, they are for wood. Some of these will certainly be the right size for some of this. I feel like that's going to be one that's going to cut the hole for that. Yeah, 20 is too small. 22 is just right. I think 25 is where we're at for this one because we have a little bit of excess room. My thoughts on this is I bought this bit of scrap wood from the allotment, and if I rest the pot on that, I can hopefully drill into that, into the wood, and the wood will give the tool the purchase it needs to get through. As you can see, I'm all hand tools, or hand power tools. I don't have a nice workshop with loads of cool made to work bits of kit. Now this doesn't have to be, I could be trying to find dead center, it really doesn't matter. Now the key here is to push down, but not so much so I'm going to jab it into myself if it goes wrong. Well, it's working. It's certainly not going to do my tools any favour, but no. Ugh. So in the past I've used speed cut drills, I think they're called, or something, where they don't have this bit on the bit to put themselves in, and then they can take their time to cut the metal. This is proving to be a slight problem. Ooh, yay. Always be prepared to let go and stop. Alright. Well, it wasn't pretty, but I think if I bend that back and forth a few times, I think we're about there. Gotta be careful, there's some sharp edges on this, so I'm taking care not to like press and cut myself. But we've got a hole. I've got a couple of files. I think the round one works. Sorry for the noise. Well, it's not a bad edge now. I'm quite happy with that. So I'm going to pop that in. See if we can't drop it in one. Oh, right, let's see if we can't. There we go. Oh, just. So yeah, pretty nice fit there. So next part on. Don't anything crazy on this, just need to have it comfortable. There we go. It's enough to engage the rubber. I want to start eating it away or pulling it through. But yeah, pretty happy with that. That's a nice tidy fit. And I don't think that should leak. But again, we'll find that out later if it's going to. This is going to be about this level here. So I want it pretty high. I want it up as high as I can go, really. Yeah. The water's only going to get to about that level. So we want the overflow to be a little bit higher. Yes. I think... Can you tell I'm making this up as I'm going along? We will do like that. So we need to figure out where our mid is on here. That's about there. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Oh, wish me luck. Just slowly. There you go. Running it in backwards seems to work. Just gentle pressure. Absolutely done. That's not hot. That's good. That's a good news. Haven't really damaged the tool much, if at all any. Probably blunted it a little bit, but I've done worse to my tools in the past. Nice, that's good. So hopefully when we put this tank connector on, it will just force it flat enough. It's a thin enough metal, I don't think it will be a problem. Just got to make sure that I'm lined up very central. There's not a lot of leeway here at all. So it's definitely going to deform. It's definitely going to deform it a fair bit, but we have to accept that. It needs to be a bit tighter, I feel. Now the bonus here is this one obviously isn't going to be sitting in the water too often. It's going to be a lot lower than this. This is just to let the steam out, and if for any reason the system fills up with too much water, then the excess water out. That's not that likely. The only time that happens is when it starts to steam over and bubble up. My hope is that I can maintain that a little bit better with a more efficiently working system. It's always more prone to happen when there's too much air in the system and it slows the flow down too much. But we'll find that out in time. I'm pretty happy with that. That's a really solid connection. I feel like the rubber's making contact in all sides. and it's still round enough for that lid to go on, which is critical. So yeah, that's part 2 in place. So something I remember thinking about the lid is this thing's going to be on the inside of it, and if I had it central and tried to close this thing, it's just going to do that. So I want this as far to the back as I can do it. That's about it there. Cool. Scientific methods, eh? Eyeballing it much? Let's just mark that up for that. That's marking nothing. Got a tiny dent, that'll do. Right, tool out. Done all that one. Now we need a 32. No danger at all, don't you worry. I think that's warped a little bit. No, I've walked again. Ugh. There. God, it's intuition more than anything else, I'm going to be honest. Oh. So this is different again. Because I've got the back one to push through now, I actually need to have it on forward again. So I'm going very slow. I'm ready to disengage at any point. I do not want to chomp up my hand. I am fully aware this is not. I should have my Colin Firth safety tie on, shouldn't I? Oi. You see what I mean? Oh. Another successful hole. This time we have a pilot hole for the other one. Yeah, this is this is what it looks like when you're not like Colin Firth and have every tool under the sun. This is what it looks like when you basically just making things up as you go along and you don't really have the tool set for anything. Right, I do not want to drill into my chopping board. I've got a scrap piece of wood there. Feeling for that bite point. As it starts to cut through, it gets to a point where it wants to bite, but then you just reverse it. Ooh. Yep. Excellent. That's got a really nice edge. You can see how I got better as I went. You can see how I've learned, and I've managed to do that. I'm really happy with that. I think that's good to go. So now, moment of truth. Yeah. So we get our washer. I'm not even sure what this is from. I just had it at the allotment. I had a couple of them in fact. So, but it fits. And then that goes on there. I'm just going to hand tighten this. There we go, there we have it. We've got our float valve in, the reservoir. Oh, that looks like a proper bit of kit now, doesn't it? Look at that. Oh, that's gone on really easy. I thought that was going to be a problem. Oh, that's really good. So now I'll just cut some pipes and add them in. Yeah, look, this has a little rubber connector already. Just I'm going to put that on. I thought this through, you see. Flexible fitting because I've got a lid to get to. And it was just laying, this is one of the bits that I had laying around. That's really nice. Then we take our pipe. Use this little cutter one. Beautiful little bit of kit this. Just open it up. Let's start at the other end where there isn't a label. Do you know what? I've got that in the wrong place, haven't I? It's supposed to be between the two things, and I'm not. I'm behind one. Let's try that again. There you go. That should roll a bit easier now. There we go. I don't know if it matters which direction I'm going. I just rotate it, give the knob a little turn, rotate it again, turn the knob. There we have it. Burr free on the outside, which is what you want. Slightly tapered even by that, so it goes into the fittings nice and easy. It's one of my favourite inventions, that. Yeah, love that sort of thing. And this one's great because I can do different sized pipes, which is important when you've got different sized pipes. But yeah, just a little section like that. We put it in there. Oh, there we go. And that's going to feed into that one. And then we just need to tighten those up. Let's see. That feels pretty good to me. And then we have it. Nice joint. Do love a good compression fitting. So easy. Right. Well, I'm going to add on all the other bits and pieces and bring you back when I'm done with that. And there we have it. That's the finished article. So, as you'll remember, we've got the float valve inside of here being fed from the mains when we've attached this, with our overflow that will lead outside of the van. Just drill a little hole through the wall, tiny bit of that poking out, should be fine. And then at the bottom here we've got our intake from the stove. Will come up here. Any bubbles or air should be able to go directly straight up, and the water flow will be directed this way, but obviously this will all be filled with water up to about this level, meaning that the pumps, which will be coming from here and here, will be able to pull off water from the stove and from the reservoir essentially, but the water level will stay up here, so it's not going to suck any air through or anything silly like that. It should just keep pulling water through, and as long as this stays up nice and high thanks to the float valve, then we should be good to go. That's the reservoir completed. Now I'll just start taking some cupboards apart, I guess. I'll just take doors off and get the backs out, and yeah, we'll get cracking. We'll start ripping the old stuff out and putting new stuff in. Fantastic. Well, as you can see, it's an absolute mess back here. Got to start somewhere. So we'll get the switch for the hot water. That's the one that just turns it on and off. With the immersion heater, that one is. We can get that out of the way. There's a thermostat here, which is part of the hot water system. That can just, we'll put that up there. You can see I'm not one for putting everything neat at the end, especially when I'm not convinced the system is like in its final build. So we've got some pipes here which are just part of the water system. We've got an expansion tank here. That's on the line coming from the main water tank. That comes down to here, comes across, splits off one cold for the tap up there, and another one feeds the calorifier. We'll call it a Nordic boiler. That's what they're calling it on here. So the Nordic boiler gets fed through this line here. The hot water comes back out. That goes to the tap. This one comes along here, and then you can't see it, but this pipe here splits off, goes that way. That's more cold water, and then the hot water. They both go up here, go above the door, back down again, and feed the shower over there. And then we've got the cold water follows on and comes down to this bit of nonsense here, which used to be what fed the reservoir on the first effort of me building this system. So we've got a pump here. This is one of the 8-watt pumps. We're going to keep that in place. God, look at the mess in here. It's ridiculous. Obviously the waste pipe from the sink is here. But then we've got pipes here and here that feeds the hot water system from the reservoir. You can see one of them is a copper pipe, which we're going to use to feed the water from the stove all the way to the reservoir, which is now going to be in here. At the moment, the reservoir is actually in another cupboard, which we'll open up in a second. The silicone one is going to be the return for the hot water. So I think this wooden post here is where I'm going to fix the expansion tank to. I think, looking at it, this pipework here could all be reused. I think I want to redo, maybe get rid of this thing out of the way. This is from an old system, and that can be replaced now, I think, along with some other bits and pieces. But some of this, like this bit here, will just, I think, be reused. It's not a problem. We've just got joins on here which I'll reuse as well. So there's loads of bits here that we can cannibalise. That's fine. Even some of this pipe work be cannibalised as well. So onward and forward. So the next part of the puzzle is in here. So let's get this door off. That there. Let's see how our lighting is. Yeah, that's pretty good. So as you can see in here, it's an absolute monstrosity. This is the old reservoir, and you can see the rusty water that's been flooding over it where it's boiled over. The lid eventually just got destroyed. It was a bamboo one. I tried to seal it with some proper silicone and it just wouldn't really take, so I ended up not being able to make an airtight seal, which is one of the big problems. And we had a small pipe like this for a vent for the steam, which worked fine when it was sealed, but eventually the lid just disintegrated, and I ended up just doing a temporary thing with some gaffer tape, which worked for, I don't know, the last month of last season. But you can see it kept wanting to bubble over because the system just kept filling up with air and kept becoming inefficient, and then that would just create a bad negative cycle. There's some other stuff in here going on. There's a bit of ventilation from an old system that I had, which basically just feeds cold air directly to the stove, like to the side of it. and then obviously that gets heated up before it gets into the van, and that just helps with condensation. But this does actually accrue a lot of condensation. I want to redo this properly with something that's actually got some insulation around it as well, but that does work quite well as a system. I actually had it was called a PIV, positive intake vent, where I had fans on it blowing the air in, but that was something we had to do before I laid this hot water system around the van, dealing with the corners. This is not my finest work. It's an embarrassment, if anything, but it can be salvaged. We will fix a lot of this up. We're going to get rid of this reservoir. All of this stuff in here is realistically just going to disappear, and all we're going to end up left with is the pipework just coming in, joining together, going into the stove, then coming back out and heading that way. So it should just be the pipework in here, and obviously some of these electrics will stay. But yeah, this is a bit of a catastrophe back here. So let's get to it. Let's rip all this out. This is the first job. Get this all out, get the pipework sort of cleaned up a little bit, and then we'll get on to the last bit where the pump is. Well, it took a little while, but we're ready to go for this. So you can see here, I've added some copper pipe going to the stove now, and that's joined to the stainless steel pipe that runs around inside of the stove with some proper metal fittings, just like this, the brass ones. Before, I had some degradation happening with the silicone pipe that was behind the stove. It just couldn't really handle that level of heat. I've had to do a little silicone sort of join here on this pipe. It was the only real way to do it, other than get some proper fittings, which to be honest would have been an absolute struggle and a nightmare trying to marry those up. So I've just gone with a ad hoc little bit of silicone like that, and it should be fine. It's a silicone pipe everywhere else. This is the return pipe for the heating system, so that's obviously coming from around the van and the radiator in the toilet room, and then this is the pipe which will be the return pipe from the hot water. So hot water return pipe, heating return pipe, joining together before the stove. That runs to the stove. This will come back from the stove and heading back round to the reservoir. So on to putting the reservoir in the next one, I suppose. We'll get started in here. Well, I'm sure you can tell from the window, but we've lost the light outside. The day is getting on. And we're making progress though. So I've used a simple screw hook just to basically hook that up there. So that's now dangling off that, but that's actually relieved a bit of pressure from here. I'm hoping that'll give me enough space now to mount this somewhere usable down here. I haven't tried it yet, so you'll see it firsthand like me. Yeah, I think somewhere like that could work. Need to get it attached to the wall somehow. Right, we have a solution. I have indeed used this bit of off-cut wood that I had laying about. I've trimmed it into the right size. So now I have also taken this apart slightly just so I can do the next part, which is that with that hook there, you can see that slides in there, and that sits on there like that. And then I've got a hook on either side that's going to hold this really awkwardly now, but essentially I'll have access to this side pretty easily. So I will just put a bungee around here, hook it around the other hook, come back around underneath, hook it on, and it's pretty firmly in place. I might even, now I look at this, there we go, on the fly still, one over the top maybe. Just to undo that, put that on. Yeah, I like that even more. Have one bungee below, one above. That's pretty well done. Yeah, there we go. Look how firm that sits. That's nice. So I've already planned it out, made sure it all fits. I've got a couple of pilot holes ready. Just got to screw it in and it'll be sorted and all mounted. And then I'll just have to get a hole in the wall for the overflow pipe, and we're good to go for putting the pumps in and sort of hooking it up to the mains and trying to fill the system. Whew, it's getting late though. It's been a long one. I don't know if you can see the clock from there, but yeah, it's flying along. It is. I should really have already had some food, but I'm not good at stopping for food. When I've got a job to do, I just kind of keep doing it until it gets done. Yeah, but that's a nice bit of work. That is. It's not a work of art, I would say, but it's going to do the job. I'm really happy with this actually. I think it stands a good chance of doing exactly what I want it to do. But of course, it's an experiment, so we just have to cross our fingers and hope I thought this all through. I'm going to get this in, and I'll show you the result. We're in. As you can see, everything's all in. It's pretty solid. Just below, you can see we've got the pipes all in, fitted nicely. This is the copper pipe that's coming from the stove, which we need to feed to the reservoir via this. So we'll just bend that around a little bit and add in some silicone pipe to marry that up nice and neatly. Then using some more silicone pipe, we're going to have these 2 points go to the 2 pumps. We've got one here that needs to be fitted in, and then you've got this one here which is already plumbed in to a certain extent. I'll probably just use the pipes again that are already existing, or maybe cut some fresh ones to make it longer. We'll see how that works. But yeah, pumps in, check valves in, and then the absolute final thing will be to essentially attach this to the system. It's going to be attached with 3 points, once after each of the check valves, and then another one obviously to this pipe for the auto refill. Essentially the idea is to have it so I can manually do a switch just to fill up the system whenever I want to, or indeed flush it through with some proper water pressure, which should help clear any bubbles. Because obviously when you've got all these bends and kinks, and like you can sort of see here, you've got a kink in the pipework here. This is obviously a mad trap for some bubbles to form. This is all ready to go. I'm really happy with this, so we'll get cracking. Unfortunately, I think I may have overlooked something. I'm not sure how I'm marrying the main system into this silicone pipe system. I feel like I was supposed to buy some parts for that. I would like to have got it done in one day, because then I can just clear everything up and then have to worry about opening everything again. However, now that the majority of it is done, if I do have to open everything up again, it's not that hard, to be honest, and everything is actually clean and easy to access now. I say easy, it's always backbreaking when I'm working down in this cupboard down here. I forgot about this, but there's no real way to sort of lean against anything without kind of breaking something. So I have to hold myself up and lean in, because I need both hands most of the time, and it's absolute killer on the back. This is the only thing that I probably hate. This is probably my pet peeve of designing things in the van, is that everything's always so tight and like squeezed in somewhere. There's not enough space to just go, oh, we'll have a big cupboard and put all our things in and pipes wherever we want. It's always something awkward, and it's always something where I'm sort of contorting myself to get in. But that's me cooked for the day. I'm not going to get any further with this. I'm going to investigate to see if I do need any other parts. If I do, I'll get them ordered. Hopefully tomorrow or the next day I'll get cracking on this again. Obviously, magic of YouTube, you'll get to see that straight away. So welcome back. It's a couple of days later, and yeah, I completely forgot a couple of really important parts. The connectors here, the ones that you see that are brass, so you've got the equal T for the 10mm. I've got a reducer to go from the 15 to the 10mm, and again the other side just the same repeated, and then I've bought a copper one in the middle here. I did contemplate getting a couple of brass valves, but I had these speed fit ones laying about. They say they're rated to 65 degrees Celsius, which I think will probably be okay. The hot water's only going to really be passing through the points at either end. Obviously it will mix with some of the water that's in here, and potentially over hours of use this could get really hot if I was running it very, very hot. I don't usually like to run it that far above 65 degrees. I have tested the system, and I think sometimes the hot water can get up to about 80 to 90 degrees, somewhere in that margin, but that's when it starts to boil out of the system, and I try to keep it well below that. So 75 I think is usually about the max that I get it to, and even if it was 75 degrees on one side, the other side is obviously going to be cold water, because this will be attached to the mains, so this is going to be filled with the cold water at all times. I don't think it's going to mix that much with this, and also because this won't be moving that much, even if some hot water sort of comes through, it's probably going to radiate some of that heat out anyway. And yeah, I don't think it's going to necessarily get to that level of temperature right up to the plastic parts, so I think they'll be okay. Plus, because it's not running through them constantly, and they're actually just sitting there in essentially some very cool air down in the bottom, I think they'll be okay. If there's any issues and I start to notice anything, obviously I'll replace them with some brass ones, but for now, because I've got the parts, I don't want to spend the money. Everything on a budget where we can. Even these little bits of 10mm, essentially some pipe that I had laying around that I'd kept at the allotment for a little while from the previous build where I had some offcuts, because obviously you keep your offcuts for this sort of thing, and that saved me quite a bit of money, because otherwise I've got to spend out on another roll of pipe that I don't need the whole thing, I just needed little bits for. It would have been a huge cost. We're going to get this in the situ, and as I say, we're going to put the one-way valves or check valves, whatever you want to call them, into the system, see how it works with filling it up. I'm pretty sure that'll work fine, and then I'm going to flush it through, get some clean water all the way through, the system. First of all, I'm going to take off the radiator and flush the part of the system just before that, then put the new radiator in, and then continue to flush the rest of the system. And hopefully, as I flush it, I'll also be filling the system to the point where once it's filled and there's been enough of a run through, we'll have fairly clean pipes. And I'm going to add in some of this stuff which prevents corrosion and limescale, and I'm hoping that this will keep my new radiator from rusting anywhere near as fast. But also we've got these auto valves, or auto vents I should say. These are hopefully going to keep any air from building up in the radiator, which I'm told will reduce the amount of rust significantly. Right, let's get cracking and finish this system. Can't wait.
Something good.
Oh, panic stations. A flood has ensued. There was a piece of pipe that was not clipped properly and not sealed at all. Oh. I've just bent a bit of pipe for now in an effort to stop it from leaking out anymore, but I need to catch the water. Oh no.
I think we're onto something good. Don't let it get away. This could be everything. You know I gotta say, I think we're onto something good. I think we're onto something good.
Blimey. As much as that's leaking, I think I'm starting to spring leaks as well. I'm sweating. Whoa. This is the stressful moment. Right, oh dear. Oh man. Just getting covered as well. Getting closer though. One problem at a time. One problem at a time. Here we go.
Don't let it get away. This could be everything. You know I gotta say, I think we're onto something good. I think we're onto something good.
Yeah, that seems acceptable. That seems good. Yeah. The only thing that needs sorting now is this silly drip here, but even that's slowing down, to be honest. I'm pretty happy with that though. I think obviously the pump areas doesn't have any water in it yet. It's only got to that stage. Now we need to turn the hot water one on. I'm going to turn that one off, and then we're going to see if this fills up okay. Sounds good. Oh. More bubbles coming through the reservoir. Again, that's a good sign. And now the bubbles have stopped. Yeah, I can see that bubbles coming through this pipe. I don't know if you can make that out, but just through this pipe there are bubbles. Maybe if I put the light behind, you'll see them. Can you see them? It's flying through every now and then, just a couple of bubbles. We'll let the system flow until some more bubbles. You can see how fast that's flowing. The bubbles are flying through. Yeah, yes, listen. That's it, no more bubbles. Okay. That's great. I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to turn this back on. I want to just check to see if there's any bubbles left in that system. Right, well, that's it. I'm absolutely done for the evening. It's 11:45. You can see I'm sweating. It's been a bit of work, I'll be honest. And the temperatures are still quite warm, so there's no rush to finish this off right this second. As it's just a tiny leak in that reservoir that needs sorting, I'll give it the time to drain out and then squirt something in there to seal it up. It's not a big job. The rest is basically good to go. I just need to turn the pumps on, give it a last quick flush through with the pumps running, maybe add a little bit more of this stuff now that I've flushed the system a little bit, and yeah, that'll be it. But to do all that, obviously I don't need the stove on, but I feel like isn't it right to have the stove on when I start firing everything up, because then I can really see, is the system more efficient? Is it running as well as I want it to? Does it deal with the expansion of the water when it gets warm? I'm really interested in a lot of factors with this. I don't really know how much the water expands and contracts with the change in temperature, and whether that means that every time that I let it get cold and refire it up, whether the reservoir will need to do quite a bit of refilling, or will it not really need to do too much of that at all? Maybe it's not as much expansion as I think that there is. So I'm really interested in that. Maybe you are too. So hopefully you'll subscribe if you haven't already, and then you'll be able to check that video out when it comes out fairly soon. Well, it's time for me to get cleared up and put all the doors back on, throw a bit of rubbish in the bin, and then get ready for bed, I suppose. I've got to get myself cleaned up, I think, at this point. But I hope you've enjoyed it. I have too. Until the next time, have fun.